Each year, over 1 million tourists explore the grandest private residence ever constructed in the United States. They stroll through opulent ballrooms adorned with invaluable tapestries, ascend stairways hewn from massive limestone slabs, and gaze up at frescoes crafted by renowned European artists. Few grasp that they're immersed in a billion-dollar tourism powerhouse. Biltmore Estate brings in more than $300 million every year, supports jobs for 2,400 individuals, and runs upscale hotels alongside acclaimed wineries. Far from a mere exhibit hall, it's a thriving commercial dynasty rooted in one man's captivating fixation. George Vanderbilt erected the most lavish personal dwelling in U.S. history, only to pass away and leave his widow grappling with the upkeep costs. Her approach revolutionized the way the nation safeguards its most majestic landmarks. This tale reveals how a Gilded-era extravagance evolved into a model for endurance. The Vanderbilt legacy originated with an individual who skipped formal education, yet amassed the greatest fortune in American history. Born in 1794 on Staten Island, Cornelius Vanderbilt launched his venture with just one sailboat, shuttling passengers around New York Harbor. Undercutting rivals' fares, toiling extended shifts, and shunning defeat, he expanded relentlessly. Upon his death in 1877, he dominated rail lines linking New York to Chicago, leaving a fortune exceeding $100 million, surpassing even the U.S. Treasury's reserves. Father to 13 offspring, he bequeathed sums sufficient for most to indulge in opulence sans employment. They erected palatial homes on Fifth Avenue, wed into European aristocracy, and passed their time overseeing staff and gracing social galas. Yet his youngest grandson, George Washington Vanderbilt, carved a distinct path. Arriving in 1862 as the last of 8 siblings, George's father, William Henry Vanderbilt, had effectively doubled the family's wealth post-Cornelius's demise. By early manhood, George ranked among America's richest heirs, untouched by labor. Fluent in 8 tongues, he amassed rare volumes, dedicating whole chambers to pristine first prints. He roamed Europe, delving into architecture and fine arts. As kin chased commerce and rival estates, George stayed scholarly, reserved, and enthralled by aesthetics. Frailty plagued him too. In the 1880s, tuberculosis menaced affluent clans, striking abruptly with no remedy available. Physicians prescribed only crisp air and elevated terrains. George's mother fretted, noting her son's pallor amid Manhattan's harsh winters, and urged southward journeys for recovery. In 1888, he journeyed to Asheville, North Carolina, a settlement nestled in a basin ringed by the Blue Ridge Mountains. The atmosphere proved pure, the scenery expansive and mostly untouched. From a mountaintop vantage, surveying endless wooded summits, George resolved to devote his remaining days to an audacious project. He aimed to forge an estate here, far beyond a seasonal getaway or humble rural haven. He sought to pioneer an unprecedented American marvel. George's blueprint mirrored a French chateau, relocated to untamed U.S. terrain. He dreamed of a functional domain, merging methodical forestry, productive farming, and communal living into an independent system. Envisioning expertly stewarded woods, streamlined agricultural operations, and respectable lodging for laborers, the central manor would embody a testament that U.S. prosperity might yield enduring elegance rather than mere indulgence. Land acquisition ensued over several years. Ultimately, he claimed 125,000 acres, spanning ridges and hollows, absorbing whole settlements. Longtime residents, some rooted there for generations, were fairly compensated, resettled, and the terrain molded to his blueprint. For the house proper, he engaged Richard Morris Hunt. At 61 in 1888, Hunt stood as America's preeminent architect. A graduate of Paris's École des Beaux-Arts, the inaugural American to finish its demanding curriculum. He had engineered the Statue of Liberty's base and the Metropolitan Museum of Art's exterior. Elite clients vied for his expertise. George Vanderbilt granted him boundless funds and unfettered artistic license. Hunt drew from three iconic French chateaux for inspiration. The Château de Blois shaped the overall structure. The Château de Chenonceau lent intricate features, and the Château de Chambord guided the rooftop design. Blending these into an original creation, he crafted a structure blending continental flair with American essence. The blueprints outlined 250 rooms across 4 acres of usable area. Additionally, George enlisted Frederick Law Olmsted for the landscaping, renowned for New York's Central Park and myriad esteemed civic areas. The 66-year-old Olmsted occupied his field's zenith, but harbored doubts about George's grand designs. The property George acquired was depleted. Years of intensive logging and agriculture had depleted the earth. Gullies from erosion marred the slopes. Olmsted candidly informed George that the site was in dire straits. George requested that he restore it. Olmsted suggested a bold strategy. Instead of merely enhancing the landscape around the residence, he aimed to rewood the whole property. He intended to sow hundreds of thousands of saplings, develop a controlled woodland, and pioneer what he termed America's inaugural systematic forestry initiative. The gardens adjacent to the manor would adopt a structured, continental style. Further out, the terrain would revert to a more untamed organic form. The shadow would nestle amid an expansive green space. Yet that space would yield resources like lumber and exemplify sound stewardship of the land. Work commenced in 1889. George was just 27. He possessed the foresight, the designers, and the funds. What he lacked was moderation. While other affluent individuals might have erected a grand dwelling and called it done, George continued to enlarge it. No aspect could be anything less than impeccable. Every substance needed to be top tier. A venture expected to last a handful of years dragged on for nearly 10. Laborers extracted limestone right from the grounds, hewing and forming slabs that tipped the scales at multiple tons apiece. Artisans brought over from overseas sculpted ornamental features manually. At its height, the build site supported more than 1,000 workers. A dedicated rail branch was constructed to haul supplies from the primary track. A full-scale brick factory was set up locally to supply the millions of bricks required for the inner partitions. The magnitude was immense. The dining chamber by itself spanned 72 feet in length, with a vaulted roof soaring 70 feet high. It boasted 3 enormous hearths, each spacious enough for a person to step into. The book collection area was crafted to accommodate 23,000 books across 2 tiers of intricately worked walnut cases. The conservatory in winter included a transparent ceiling and a fountain of marble sourced from Italy. The estate offered 35 sleeping quarters for relatives and visitors, 43 washing areas, 65 hearths, a subterranean pool for swimming, a lane for bowling, and a fitness room. The helps' lodgings formed a distinct section. George envisioned a team of no fewer than 80 to upkeep the residence and its surroundings. Their quarters were simple, yet cozy, well beyond the usual standards for household employees back then. Dedicated paths and stairs allowed the staff to navigate the building unseen by residents or company. The engineering features were remarkable for the late 19th century. A centralized furnace heated all areas from basement furnaces. Electric illumination lit every corner, powered by the property's dedicated generator. Cooling units preserved provisions in vast pantries. Lifts transported people across stories. Every washroom had access to both heated and chilled water. Biltmore provided comforts that typical U.S. households wouldn't see for half a century. George oversaw it with intense focus. He scrutinized each blueprint decision, sanctioned every supply, and examined each space as it formed. He made frequent voyages to Europe to select decor. He procured Renaissance-era wall hangings from French palaces. He collected artworks by Renoir, Whistler, and Sargent. He commissioned bespoke pieces from elite makers. The structure evolved not only in size but in splendor, brimming with items of true cultural and antique worth. Expenses climbed without pause. Early projections pegged the outlay at around $3 million. By 1893, George had surpassed that figure, with substantial labor still ahead. The ultimate price tag neared $6 million, comparable to more than $200 million today. George was burning through his legacy, quicker than the family wealth could replenish it. He appeared unconcerned. On the eve of Christmas in 1895, George Vanderbilt unveiled the doors of his finished manor. He was 33. Over 6 years and an astonishing expenditure, he had fashioned what endures as the biggest personal residence in U.S. history, the seasonal gathering that Yuletide featured kin and intimates. They toured chambers that left them speechless. They were struck by the immensity, the artistry, the bold vision George had realized. Yet as the visitors reveled, an issue loomed large. The building was complete. The debts were not. George had erected a marvel that proved fiscally unviable. Yearly upkeep would top $250,000. Just the land levies posed an overwhelming load. His fortune, immense as it was, had limits, and he had just depleted much of it on the edifice. He had raised a fortress in the backwoods. Now he needed a way to fund it. George Vanderbilt wed Edith Stassen-Dresser in Paris on June 1, 1898. She was 25, from established New York elite lineage, but lacking substantial assets herself. George was 35. The ceremony was restrained for Vanderbilt measure, with only immediate relatives and companions present. After their European honeymoon, the couple settled back at Biltmore to start married life. Edith turned the grand residence, once a showcase for a single man, into a true family dwelling. She oversaw the servants, handled the domestic finances, and arranged events that filled the expansive spaces with vitality. Beyond the house, she immersed herself in the local area. The Biltmore village, built on estate property to accommodate employees and offer amenities, soon became a key focus for her. She founded a school, a hospital, and a church there, while launching support initiatives for the workers' households. In contrast to George's emphasis on the property's aesthetic splendor, Edith prioritized the individuals who kept it operational. Their daughter, Cornelia, arrived on August 22, 1900, the sole offspring for George and Edith. Her birth sparked happiness, yet it also underscored a persistent dilemma: the fate of this colossal property. Who could sustain such a vast domain? George kept investing heavily in Biltmore, even as concerns mounted. He grew the forestry efforts, bringing on Ford Pinchot, who would eventually lead the United States Forest Service, to oversee the woods with scientific precision. He launched a dairy farm featuring champion livestock. He erected greenhouses to provide year-round blooms and crops. Additional structures went up, such as All Souls Church in Biltmore Village, crafted by Richard Morris Hunt to echo the main house's architectural flair. The estate supported a workforce of hundreds. Landscapers tended the manicured gardens. Timber experts handled the logging activities. Field workers tended the farmland. Within the house, over 80 full-time household staff ensured smooth operations, including valets and chambermaids, chefs and scullery helpers, stewards and caretakers. Everyone needed wages, lodging, and oversight. The yearly upkeep expenses were immense. Posthumous calculations pegged Biltmore's maintenance at about $250,000 annually in early 1900s dollars. This covered payroll, upkeep and fixes, power from the on-site generator, provisions for residents and staff, materials for agriculture and logging, plus taxes on the enormous grounds. George's trust fund earnings just managed to foot these bills, leaving scant room for reserves or expansions. Then finances took a turn for the worse. In 1907, a nationwide banking crisis erupted. Share prices plummeted. Loans vanished. Affluent clans reliant on dividends saw their assets dwindle. The Vanderbilt wealth, though vast, suffered hits too. George's yearly earnings fell sharply. The gap between Biltmore's demands and his resources narrowed perilously. He started discreetly, offloading items. Artworks departed the galleries. Certain pieces of furniture hit the auction block. He cut back on personnel where possible, but the residence was too immense to run short-staffed. Areas needing routine upkeep couldn't be neglected. Essential mechanisms demanding ongoing care couldn't be sidelined. The building required a full contingent of laborers. George also sought ways to boost self-sufficiency. The dairy sold dairy products to nearby vendors. The timber operations offloaded lumber. The greenhouses marketed blooms and seedlings. Yet these earnings paled against the outlays. Biltmore wasn't meant for profitability. It symbolized a vision, and visions seldom balance their own books. By 1910, George, nearing 50, displayed clear health decline. He'd always been frail, and the tuberculosis worries that originally drew him to Asheville lingered. Fatigue overtook him quickly. He devoted more hours to recovery than to directing the property. Edith stepped up, collaborating with overseers to sustain efficient management. On March 6, 1914, George passed away due to issues arising from appendix surgery. At 51, he'd resided at Biltmore for under 2 decades. The home he'd devoted 6 years and boundless funds to creating now fell wholly under Edith's control. Its worth stood at roughly $10 million, though that number deceived. The bulk of the assets were tied up in the terrain and the structure. Liquidating them would demolish George's legacy. Edith, at 41, was now a widow raising a 13-year-old girl. She controlled 125,000 acres, America's biggest private residence, and operating debts surpassing $400,000 each year. Lacking prior expertise in such a massive enterprise, she relied on consultants, property administrators, and a governing council. Still, ultimate choices rested with her. Her initial challenge: could Biltmore endure? The land taxes by themselves posed an insurmountable load. North Carolina evaluated the estate according to its overall land area and the worth of all developments on it. The yearly property taxes climbed into the tens of thousands of dollars. The revenue Edith received from George's leftover investments fell short of handling both the taxes and the day-to-day expenses. A shift was essential. In 1915, Edith undertook the initial round of tough choices. She started offloading parcels of land, not the central grounds surrounding the house, but the expansive wooded tracts that George and Olmsted had labored tirelessly to restore with trees. She pitched an idea to the federal authorities. The recently formed United States Forest Service, eager to safeguard natural areas, showed keen interest in purchasing sizable parcels for national woodlands. The talks dragged on. Government red tape proceeded at a glacial pace. Yet by 1916, Edith finalized the transfer of about 87,000 acres to the government at a bit more than $5 an acre. That territory joined Pisgah National Forest, protected forever as communal wildland. The transaction brought in around $435,000, sufficient to settle some debts and create a buffer of funds. George would have felt deep sorrow. He had invested years and vast fortunes in gathering and replanting that terrain. He had pictured it as an exemplary property, showcasing advanced forestry practices. Now over 2/3 of his grand plan had vanished, auctioned off to avert the total downfall of the rest. Yet Edith faced no other option. She could safeguard the house and its nearby lands, or risk forfeiting it all in a futile effort to uphold the full breadth of George's ambitious vision. Despite the land divestment, Biltmore's money matters stayed shaky. The smaller land size eased the tax load a little, but the house demanded its full complement of staff, ongoing maintenance, and perpetual upkeep fees. Edith trimmed expenses wherever possible. The workforce shrank. Certain areas got sealed off to cut down on fuel and upkeep bills. Social gatherings happened less often. The property, once alive with lavish parties for scores of visitors, turned subdued and secluded. Cornelia matured amid this air of refined fading. She grasped young that her family's riches, though substantial, had limits. The house, which appeared timeless, proved delicate, reliant on meticulous oversight and unwavering attention. She observed her mother navigating harsh dilemmas, weighing upkeep against endurance. In 1924, Cornelia wed John Francis Amherst Cecil, a British noble and the junior offspring of Lord William Cecil. The ceremony occurred at All Souls Church in Biltmore Village. It was an opulent event drawing elite attendees from nationwide, yet it also marked a sort of closure. Cornelia stood as the final Vanderbilt raised at Biltmore in its role as a personal residence. The future held something entirely new. Edith kept grappling with the estate's budget woes throughout the 1920s. The era ushered in broad affluence for the United States. But Biltmore's plight didn't brighten. The core issue persisted. Running the house outpaced what the family's earnings could support, forever. Edith had offloaded land to gain breathing room. That respite was dwindling. Then, in 1929, the stock market crashed. The Great Depression dawned. Edith saw the worth of the family's surviving assets nosedive. Earnings from equities and securities, already marginal, dropped to amounts utterly incapable of meeting Biltmore's demands. She confronted a grim dilemma. She might auction the property, probably to a builder who would raise the house and carve up the grounds. She might forsake it, step aside, and allow lenders to claim it. Or she might try a bold, untested path. She might welcome fee-paying guests to Biltmore. The notion of turning a private home into a tourist attraction for cash seemed outrageous in 1930. Affluent households didn't welcome outsiders for profit. Galleries showcased artworks and relics openly. Landmarks maintained by state entities or charities gave guided views. But an inhabited family seat, still used by its founder's kin, with tickets sold at entry, that clashed with every norm of seclusion and decorum in elite American society. Edith Vanderbilt lacked any other path. In March 1930, Biltmore House welcomed the public for the inaugural time. Entry cost $2 a head. Guests toured the primary level chambers, admired the woven wall hangings and artwork, and caught a sense of how the nation's elite dwelled in the Gilded Age. The higher levels, housing Edith's personal spaces, stayed off limits. Crowds surged right away. Thousands arrived within the opening weeks. The Great Depression had wrecked household budgets everywhere in America. Still, $2 suited average families looking for a budget-friendly outing. They motored in, via the fresh roads expanding southern travel for leisure. Visitors strolled through the grand banquet hall, gazing up at the soaring 70-foot ceiling. They inspected the library's intricate walnut shelving. They scrutinized the artwork and pondered the immense fortune needed to dwell in such opulence. For Edith, each guest marked a minor triumph, laced with a major concession. Ticket sales brought in funds to offset upkeep expenses. Yet allowing outsiders into the home entailed forfeiting the seclusion George had prized above all. It required employing docents to lead parties through the chambers. It involved cordoning off pieces of furniture to avoid harm. It forced her to observe countless footsteps scuffing the meticulously crafted inlaid flooring. Initial tours featured simple overviews, typically led by on-site workers adapting to their fresh duties, sharing essentials on the residence's building and its renowned designer. Guests weren't urged to dawdle. The aim was swift passage to boost earnings while curbing damage and interference in the areas Edith continued to occupy. Still, the initiative succeeded. During the Depression's darkest period, Biltmore's entry charges formed a vital economic base that averted the property's downfall. With stock returns near zero and bonds failing nationwide, sightseers persisted. They forked over their $2, picked up souvenirs from a modest shop, and departed with tales of the astonishing manor tucked away in the North Carolina hills. Prosperity bred fresh challenges. Greater crowds accelerated deterioration of the decor. Rugs lost color from relentless treading. Fabrics bore the marks of heavy use, the warmth and illumination setups meant for a secluded family strained under the influx. Edith ended up channeling ticket money into fixes that a closed-door estate would have dodged. She also endured backlash from her social peers. Fellow Vanderbilts debated if admitting fee-paying crowds suited their legacy. Some urged her to offload the property and subsist on the gains. Acquaintances from her elite New York era offered condolences while quietly questioning her poise. Edith brushed them off. Her decision stood firm. Come the mid-1930s, Biltmore had forged a routine that would endure for years. The dwelling stayed Edith's home, yet doubled as a public draw. These dual purposes clashed uneasily. Edith resided in select upper-level quarters. Tourists accessed the formal zones downstairs. Employees balanced long-standing family service with emerging tasks as escorts and maintainers for outsiders. Yearly attendance rose gradually, yet reliably. In 1935, roughly 20,000 individuals annually shelled out for mansion access. The income, crucial for Biltmore's endurance, didn't overhaul its budget. Edith fretted over funds as ever, though the urgent threat had lifted. The residence wouldn't face sale or neglect. It persisted for the moment. Then in 1941, a surprising prospect emerged. The National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., scarcely a year established, confronted World War II's outbreak in the U.S. Fearing aerial assaults from foes, curators sought a sheltered spot distant from shorelines to safeguard irreplaceable art. Biltmore, boasting vast chambers and a remote mountaintop perch, fit perfectly. Edith consented to shelter the gallery's premier holdings. Starting in early 1942, vehicles unloaded boxes holding masterpieces by Rembrandt, Vermeer, and fellow luminaries. These multi-million-dollar canvases, even back then, found secure spots in Biltmore's ground-level areas. Sentries with weapons kept watch over the corridors. For the conflict's length, the estate ranked among America's most fortified, non-public sites. No compensation came directly. Edith provided the venue as a civic duty, yet the exposure proved priceless. Press outlets nationwide noted how the nation's cultural gems were safeguarded at a secluded North Carolina residence. Biltmore's fame spread to masses unfamiliar with George Vanderbilt or his Alpine Palace. Post-war, the U.S. surged into car-based travel with fervor never seen. Roads proliferated. Fuel flowed abundantly and inexpensively. Ordinary households could now fund getaways once unthinkable across eras. They headed southward to flee chilly northern climes. They ventured into the Great Smoky Mountains. Countless detoured to Biltmore. Crowds swelled. By 1950, the grounds drew about 50,000 visitors yearly. The entry fee had climbed to $3. The guided tours grew to encompass additional areas of the house, along with richer details on the Vanderbilts' daily lives and customs. A modest dining spot launched on the property, offering full meals for guests eager to linger all day. Edith observed these developments with conflicting emotions. She took pride in Biltmore's endurance, especially as numerous other Gilded Age properties faced demolition or neglect. She valued how the public cherished George's legacy, Yet she also grieved the erosion of seclusion and personal connection. The residence where she and her spouse had lived intimately now operated as a commercial venture, and such enterprises rarely feel like true homes. In 1958, Edith Stuyvesant Vanderbilt passed away at 84 years old. She had survived George by 44 years. Through the Great Depression, a global conflict and sweeping societal shifts that reshaped America, she had safeguarded his masterpiece. By welcoming the public inside, she had sacrificed George's ideal of seclusion to secure the estate's future. Whether he might have endorsed her choices remains a mystery. But absent her actions, Biltmore would likely have vanished. Her will bequeathed the property to her grandsons, George Henry Vanderbilt Cecil and William Amherst Vanderbilt Cecil, the siblings, offspring of Cornelia and John Cecil, had spent portions of their youth at Biltmore, observing their grandmother navigate the tightrope between conservation and visitor appeal. The duty now fell to them. George Cecil, the elder, initially received the primary house and central holdings. William gained separate family holdings, though by 1960 the pair restructured their agreement. William assumed main oversight of Biltmore, treating it as a commercial operation. George turned to alternative pursuits. This choice would later show its importance. At 30, with a Harvard education and a pragmatic outlook, unlike that of George Vanderbilt or Edith, William eyed Biltmore and recognized vast untapped opportunities. It drew crowds for tours, yet provided scant else. Visitors arrived, toured the interior, and departed. Could they be persuaded to extend their visits? Could Biltmore evolve from mere sight into a comprehensive getaway? The estate had weathered its initial threats. Now it faced a makeover that would elevate mere endurance to resounding success. William perceived a key insight that had eluded Edith's full understanding. Biltmore wasn't vying against fellow historic sites. It contended with amusement parks, coastal getaways, and mountain ski spots. Vacationing families sought spots that could fill several days. Even the most stunning 2-hour manor visit couldn't sustain a full week's itinerary. For Biltmore to expand past basic viability, it required reinvention beyond just a grand house. His inaugural bold move sparked debate. In 1979, he repurposed part of the main residence into lodging for overnight visitors. 4 second-floor chambers underwent updates to host fee-paying stays. Preservationists recoiled at the notion. These were spaces where George and Edith had rested, where Cornelia had matured. Strangers would now occupy those beds, use those baths, and gaze out over the once exclusive grounds each morning. Priced at $150 nightly, steep for the time, the rooms booked solid right away. Travelers readily shelled out extra for the thrill of residing within the house itself. They yearned to step into Vanderbilt roles, even briefly. Earnings from those 4 suites stayed limited, yet validated William's hunch. Folks would invest not only in viewing Biltmore but in living amid it. He ordered consumer studies. The polls showed guests averaged 2 nights in Asheville but devoted just 3 hours to the estate. Biltmore snagged only a sliver of their holiday budget. They covered entry fees, maybe grabbed a memento, then headed off to spend on food and rooms elsewhere. William aimed to claim more of that cash flow while upholding the site's unique essence. His approach involved measured growth. By 1983, Biltmore unveiled its debut. Proper eatery, Deer Park, housed in a restored outbuilding away from the primary structure. It served refined southern fare, costly but approachable. The space boasted vistas of the surrounding lands. Those who'd roamed the house earlier could come back for midday or evening meals, prolonging their on-site presence. Next arrived William's riskiest venture. In 1985, Biltmore Estate Winery launched operations. The move felt odd. North Carolina boasted virtually no winemaking scene. conditions didn't suit it. The weather mismatched, with experts warning that moisture would spoil the vines. The earth wasn't ideal for grape growing either. William brushed aside the skeptics. William brought on board French winemakers, introduced European grape varieties, and funneled millions of dollars into climate-controlled fermentation setups and aging cellars. The facility made use of spaces that were once the estate's dairy barns, originally constructed by George Vanderbilt back in the 1890s. These imposing brick edifices, crafted to align with the mansion's architectural flair, created a refined environment. He maintained the outer facades exactly as they were, but stripped out and updated the insides completely. Stainless steel tanks took over from the old milk containers. Oak barrels now occupied chambers that previously sheltered cows. The initial vintages turned out fairly ordinary. Reviewers who even took the time to evaluate them gave only mild compliments, if any. Yet William's goal wasn't to rival Napa Valley's heavyweights. Instead, he aimed to craft a memorable outing. Guests could explore the mansion early in the day, enjoy a meal at the on-site restaurant, and then dedicate the afternoon to wine sampling inside a charming stone edifice. They had the option to buy bottles as souvenirs, allowing the Biltmore magic to linger after they departed. The operation thrived far beyond initial estimates. Come the early 1990s, it had become America's top-visited winery, drawing more than 250,000 people each year. As the vines grew stronger and the winemakers adapted to North Carolina's tricky weather, the wines got better. Certain years started earning local accolades, though the true triumph lay in the finances. The winery brought in over $20 million annually through tastings, shop sales, and supplies to eateries and liquor stores. William channeled those earnings into further growth. The gardens, which had been kept up but not expanded since Olmsted's era, underwent extensive refurbishment. Fresh plantings brought back the founding design. Pathways got upgraded. Themed seasonal exhibits were added. On their own, the gardens turned into a draw, supporting extra entry charges. He launched fresh event initiatives, too. Biltmore started facilitating weddings amid the gardens and various estate structures. The costs were hefty, frequently topping $20,000 for one occasion. Still, pairs eagerly shelled out to wed in one of the nation's most iconic photo spots. During high season, the estate handled several weddings every weekend, all without clashing with standard sightseeing. The holiday period got a major boost under his watch. William amplified the festive adornments to the point where they formed a standalone highlight, distinct from the main house tours. The mansion's interiors brimmed with scores of Christmas trees, each styled around a specific motif. Poinsettias cascaded along the stairs. Wreaths and garlands festooned every inch. He rolled out candlelit nighttime tours, capping group sizes and hiking fees for a cozy upscale vibe. The approach paid off handsomely. Visitor turnout in December surged dramatically. By the close of the 1990s, over 30% of Biltmore's yearly crowd showed up in the 6-week stretch from Thanksgiving through New Year's. That holiday lineup pulled in enough cash to offset the quieter off-season months. William also made a pivotal choice that shaped Biltmore's ties with nearby residents. He opted to offload some land, not the central property, but outlying lots. He oversaw these transactions tightly, holding veto power on development plans. What emerged were high-end neighborhoods, grand homes, and posh residences that harmonized with Biltmore's essence instead of undermining it. Those property deals raked in tens of millions, which he funneled straight into enhancing the estate, though they sparked debate. Detractors claimed he was straying from George Vanderbilt's ideals. They insisted that parting with any acreage went against the core ethos of safeguarding the legacy. William countered that his great-grandfather sought to foster beauty and keep a functional estate alive. Such sales provided the funds to achieve exactly that. Absent those resources, Biltmore couldn't shoulder the ongoing upkeep essential for true conservation. By 2000, The annual footfall hit 900,000. The estate supported more than 1,000 jobs. Yearly income surpassed $100 million, stemming from tickets, stays, dining and drinks, the winery, merchandise, and unique happenings. Biltmore had shifted from a struggling home exhibit reliant on door fees to a multifaceted visitor hub. But William had more in store. His boldest project was still ahead. In 2001, the Inn on Biltmore Estate debuted. Far from a few repurposed mansion suites, this was a custom-designed upscale hotel, boasting 213 rooms, perched on a ridge with sweeping estate vistas. Its look nodded to the mansion's style, without mimicking it outright. Visitors forked over $350 or higher nightly for accommodations gazing out over the peaks. The inn revolutionized Biltmore's operations entirely. Families now had the chance to linger for 3 or 4 days on the grounds, never needing to step off-site. Visitors had the option to explore the grand house, enjoy meals at various eateries, sample the estate's wines, wander through the lush gardens, trek along scenic paths, and retire to opulent lodging, all without venturing off the grounds. All their expenditures directly benefited Biltmore. The property had evolved into the kind of self-sustaining haven that William Cecil had long imagined, one that could rival top resorts nationwide. Beyond leisure seekers, the inn drew in professional gatherings and corporate functions, opportunities rarely available to typical house museums. Firms shelled out fees to conduct sessions in the hotel's meeting spaces, creating yet another income source. The site's allure reached corporate professionals too, who gladly paid top dollar for such an exceptional backdrop. Skeptics still debated if Biltmore had drifted too far from its roots. The retreat George Vanderbilt created as a personal haven now served as the cornerstone of a thriving business network. Upscale lodgings, vineyards, eateries, event spaces for weddings, and even residential developments had been integrated into his foundational dream. Might he have endorsed it, or found it shocking? William Cecil had a straightforward reply. His great-grandfather constructed Biltmore to endure. Adaptation was the sole path to longevity. Virtually every other Gilded Age estate had either been torn down or repurposed for public institutions. The Breakers in Newport persisted merely as a museum run by a historical group. Hearst Castle, on the California coast, had been gifted to state authorities. In contrast, Biltmore stayed under family ownership, remaining private land while producing ample funds to handle its upkeep independently. No need for taxpayer support or philanthropic gifts. The overhaul William Cecil spearheaded from 1960 through 2010 marked a profound rethinking of historic conservation in the U.S. Biltmore, demonstrated that private control and financial viability could harmonize with safeguarding heritage. The house persisted, not in spite of its visitor-driven operations, but thanks to them. Figures highlight William Cecil's achievements. Back in 1960, Biltmore drew around 200,000 guests yearly, with earnings just scraping by to meet basic expenses. By 2010, yearly visitors topped 1.2 million. Income surpassed $200 million. The estate supported over 2,400 jobs, positioning it as the biggest private employer in western North Carolina. Yet stats only scratched the surface of the shift. Biltmore emerged as a blueprint that fellow historic sites examined and sought to emulate. The approach was straightforward on paper, but challenging to implement. Safeguard the central historic elements with meticulous fidelity to the past. Encircle them with supportive ventures that prolong guest involvement, channel earnings back into upkeep and repairs, sustain private, family-led management to uphold standards and direction. Competing properties attempted this strategy, yielding varied outcomes. Few matched Biltmore's blend of majestic design. A vast grounds and access to nearby visitor hubs. Plenty realized that developing inns and vineyards demanded funds they simply didn't have. A handful managed to broaden their scope successfully. Others faltered, leading to sales or transfers to nonprofit guardians. Biltmore's triumphs also sparked scholarly interest. Management courses dissected its income strategies. Tourism curricula delved into its hospitality offerings. Experts in conservation probed the balance between business demands and era-true integrity. William Cecil sometimes spoke at colleges, outlining his beliefs. The residence needed to earn its keep via income, he maintained. No state agency would foot the bill indefinitely, nor any trust possess the resources. Profitable management was the only viable long-term plan. The vineyard kept growing. By 2010, Biltmore Estate winery output hit more than 150,000 cases each year. Quality had soared since the initial trial runs.
Winery contributed roughly $30 million. Winery contributed roughly $30 million yearly to revenues. That same year, Biltmore unveiled a significant new feature. Antler Hill Village rose on estate grounds, roughly a mile from the main house. This development featured a working farm showcasing farming practices akin to George Vanderbilt's era. It housed a smithy for live demonstrations of old-school trades. Several dining spots provided diverse culinary options. The wine-tasting areas moved here, with bigger setups to accommodate swelling numbers. Antler Hill Village fulfilled a key goal, spreading out crowds over more space to ease pressure on the house. It offered kid-friendly pursuits that outshone the standard mansion walkthrough, especially for parents with little ones. Barnyard critters and interactive displays held children's attention. At the same time, grown-ups could linger over wine samplings and browse the enlarged shops. The Antler Hill Village substantially lengthened the typical length of stays for guests. Back in 1960, people usually spent just 2 hours at Biltmore, but by 2010, that figure had risen to 6 to 8 hours on average. Certain visitors lingered for several days, especially those staying at the inn. Each extra hour opened up more chances for revenue. For instance, a family could cover entrance fees, grab 2 meals, pick up some wine, snag souvenirs, and even come back for an evening candlelight experience. In total, a group's expenditures might surpass $300 without much effort. William Cecil poured significant resources into digital enhancements as well. Biltmore pioneered a robust web platform ahead of many other heritage sites. It facilitated online sales of tickets, room bookings at the hotel, and reservations for events. Through email campaigns, the estate nurtured connections with past guests by sharing exclusive deals and updates on fresh initiatives. They also assembled a detailed database of customer data, including interests and buying habits, to support precise outreach efforts. The holiday festivities grew into Biltmore's hallmark attraction. Come 2010, the mansion boasted over 70 Christmas trees scattered across its interiors. Every space got decked out with intricate setups tied to distinct motifs. To foster a cozy vibe, candlelight evenings capped group sizes and commanded higher fees. Could top 150,000, pulling in more than could top 150,000, pulling in more than $40 million in revenue for the month. Such a holiday surge posed logistical hurdles. The property had to ramp up staffing for the December rush, yet couldn't sustain a full team all year. Their approach relied on recruiting temporary help. College kids home for break, retirees wanting short-term gigs, and staff from local resorts took on hundreds of roles for 6 to 8 weeks. Coordinating training for this group and upholding high standards called for advanced HR strategies. William also grappled with mounting scrutiny over Biltmore's ties to Asheville and the broader area. The estate's expansion had reshaped the local marketplace. Lodging and dining spots county-wide leaned heavily on sightseers drawn to the property. Property prices had soared as the zone earned its spot as a prime getaway. Still, locals voiced gripes over jammed roads, skyrocketing home values, and the shift from a serene hill town to a bustling tourist hub. Yearly, Biltmore funneled millions in taxes,
to support area education and infrastructure. Its workforce circulated paychecks throughout the vicinity, boosting the economy. Research indicated the site spurred more than $200 million in ripple effects outside its direct activities. Yet the dynamics stayed nuanced. Biltmore served as the area's top boon, while irking some who bristled at tourism's downsides. William Cecil stepped down as CEO in 2015, but stayed active in key planning. His son, Bill Cecil Jr., took the reins. Marking the fifth family-led era, they orchestrated the handover meticulously to safeguard the core direction. Bill Jr. had logged years in diverse on-site jobs, gaining hands-on insight into operations. With the next Cecil at the helm, Biltmore kept pushing boundaries. In 2015, a new upscale lodging option, the Village Hotel, debuted, right by Antler Hill Village. Unlike the inn, it catered to a laid-back, kid-friendly crowd at more modest prices. Together, the hotels gave Biltmore command of over 400 accommodations, on par with moderate resort setups. The estate rolled out fresh event lineups, too. Outdoor concerts with big-name performers in the mansion gardens lured crowds ready to splurge on upscale seats. Dinners, blending wines with dishes from guest star cooks, highlighted the vineyard's lineup. Such offerings reeled in wealthy crowds who typically skipped old house tours. By 2020, Biltmore Estate stood out as a top private draw in America. Visitor numbers hovered from 1.3 to 1.5 million yearly, swayed by finances and forecasts. In peak times, earnings topped $300 million. Peak staffing hit 2,600 workers. The Grand House stayed the focal point, safeguarded more diligently with growing funds. Under William Cecil's blueprint, a dedicated preservation unit formed, filled with experts in fabric care, artwork revival, and antique upkeep. The team stayed busy swapping items to cut down on light damage, tracking climate factors, and fixing issues early. Big fixes happened often. They renewed the roof in phases, laying traditional slate to echo the historic look. The extensive repairs ran into the millions of dollars and spanned several decades before wrapping up. Yet they guaranteed the building's resistance to the elements. Inside, the rooms underwent meticulous restoration, guided by in-depth studies of the original palettes and layout of furnishings. The aim was to recreate the mansion exactly as it looked when George and Edith lived there, rather than turning it into a vague replica of a bygone era. George Vanderbilt's original dream had evolved significantly, though it might not have been entirely forsaken. His aim was to craft something magnificent while showing thoughtful care for the land. The Grand House stayed as stunning as ever, and one could argue it was safeguarded even better than it might have been under an underfunded public entity. The Woodland initiative he launched kept going strong, now enhanced with initiatives focused on eco-education. The property avoided being carved up or overbuilt, limiting development only to what was needed to support upkeep. Yet it had morphed into an entity beyond his wildest thoughts. A thriving enterprise that hires thousands of people, brings in hundreds of millions in earnings, and runs hotels, vineyards, and spots for weddings. The secluded haven where he once withdrew from society now opens its doors to visitors from everywhere. If that shift truly respected or undermined his goals comes down to personal priorities, sticking faithfully to his initial concept or ensuring the longevity of his creation. The wedding side of things highlights both the brilliance and the debates surrounding Biltmore's shift toward commerce. George Vanderbilt designed the estate as a hideaway from high society, a spot to dodge the duties and attention tied to his lineage. Today, his heirs lease out that very seclusion to outsiders for $30,000 a pop. The scale is immense. Biltmore accommodates more than 1,000 weddings each year. Many unfold in the gardens or outlying structures rather than the house proper. But everyone happens on land George saw as his private retreat. On a busy summer Saturday, you might spot 3 or 4 events, running at once in various spots around the grounds. The estate has a team of specialized planners who handle all the ins and outs for pairs, picking menus for post-ceremony meals, designing flower setups that blend with the landscaping, scouting photo spots that frame the mansion's outline, and selecting tunes that fit the space's sound qualities. It all runs like a luxury resort, which is precisely its current role. Detractors label this the deepest affront to George's ideals, noting how he deliberately picked those isolated North Carolina hills to avoid such public gatherings. During his life, he rarely went to weddings and threw even fewer at Biltmore. The notion of his domain turning into a hotspot for outsiders' matrimonial celebrations probably would have appalled him. Still, the income from these events bankrolls upkeep that's otherwise out of reach. Just one packed Saturday can pull in upwards of $100,000. Those funds cover slate fixes on the roof, touch-ups on painted surfaces, and the full staff of experts safeguarding the house's treasures. Absent that cash, the place would fall into disrepair. Thanks to it, Biltmore upholds upkeep levels on par with top-tier museums. The shops bring their own mix of ironies. The estate runs several stores hawking items from holiday decorations to scale model pieces of furniture. The main outlet, right by the mansion's entryway, feels like an upscale emporium divided into specialty zones. Household items echoing the house's style, Biltmore labeled vintages and upscale eats, volumes on the Vanderbilts and era-specific building designs, plus baubles, outfits, and add-ons. Sales from retail top $40 million yearly. The outlet staff savvy purchasers who hit industry expos and team up with makers to craft one-of-a-kind goods. The Biltmore label carries weight on its own, separate from the house. Shoppers grab these things not out of necessity, but for a physical link to their visit. George Vanderbilt wasn't in the business of selling. He was a gatherer who stocked his residence with pieces of real artistic and historical worth. He'd probably view peddling his surname as crass, but that very peddling keeps his gathered items intact. The woven wall hangings in the dining area need regulated environments when off view. The artwork calls for routine expert fixes. The seating requires custom maintenance. Store earnings cover every bit of it. The dining and drink side has grown just as polished. Biltmore manages 10 eateries and coffee spots dotted around the grounds, from grab-and-go joints to elegant fine dining halls.
Also an on-site bakery churning out loaves. And sweets for use throughout the food areas. A central kitchen facility handles the preparation of key ingredients, shared across all dining outlets, promoting uniformity and streamlined processes. In high season, the culinary teams deliver more than 10,000 meals each day. The supply chain mirrors that of a modest urban area. These food and drink activities bring in roughly $60 million yearly, positioning them as the estate's second biggest income driver, behind entry fees. Yet they demand ongoing funding. Cooking areas call for regular equipment updates. Banquet spaces need periodic makeovers. Compliance with hygiene and security protocols requires unwavering attention. Workers receive training to uphold a level of hospitality that supports the upscale rates. Part of the estate's organic agriculture supports these efforts. Produce like veggies, spices, and select fruits hail from Biltmore-controlled lands. Eggs come from chickens of historic breeds. Though the farm isn't vast enough to cover all restaurant demands, it boosts promotional appeal. Dish descriptions can highlight genuine, farm-fresh sourcing, and the active farm draws in tourists for learning opportunities. Instructional activities have emerged as a fresh income channel. Biltmore provides exclusive tours revealing mansion sections beyond standard routes. One option leads visitors up to the challenging slate rooftop for panoramic estate vistas. Another delves into building methods and intricate design elements. Such exclusive experiences fetch elevated fees, typically $50 or higher over the standard ticket. The property also runs sessions and lessons. Wine classes cover sampling skills and vineyard fundamentals.
Landscaping seminars draw from Biltmore-influenced garden designs. Photo workshops leverage the estate's scenic landscapes as live studios. Every initiative adds to earnings while deepening guest involvement. For gentlemen, combine liquors with smokes. For gentlemen, combine liquors with smokes in an all-male environment. These focused events enable pricing variations tied to experiential worth instead of expenses. Beyond basic event rentals, Biltmore has forged business ties. The estate permits its branding and visuals for use by producers crafting items from furnishings to shade palettes. A collaboration with a leading paint firm yielded a Biltmore line of shades drawn from the house's classic tones. Shoppers at supply outlets can select Vanderbilt Blue or Biltmore Ivory, tying their renovations to the site's legacy. Deals for furniture allow makers to replicate items from the mansion's holdings. A couch echoing one from the library could sell for $8,000. Buyers get an authenticity document connecting the item to Biltmore. Royalties flow to the estate per transaction, all without any production involvement. By 2020, these agreements yielded about $10 million each year. With low maintenance costs, they offer almost unadulterated gains. Still, they propel the Biltmore identity into realms George Vanderbilt couldn't have foreseen. His personal belongings turn into models for widespread manufacturing. The lodging ventures mark the estate's biggest financial commitment, and perhaps its most debated shift. The inn on Biltmore Estate, plus the Village Hotel, provide over 400 guest rooms combined. At peak times, they run close to capacity, yielding nightly lodging income surpassing $40,000 across both sites. However, inns necessitate steady capital infusions. Accommodations undergo refreshers to align with evolving visitor preferences. Tech enhancements continue as guests seek superior internet and integration features. Rivalry from emerging high-end spots nearby compels Biltmore to uphold luxury benchmarks. Over the last 20 years, the estate has poured tens of millions into lodging upgrades. These facilities introduce management hurdles, unlike those in typical house museums. Workforce dynamics grow intricate. Attempts at organizing unions arise now and then, but haven't prevailed. Perks for staff must rival those from big hotel operators. High churn in cleaning and dining roles means endless hiring and onboarding. Handling visitor feedback calls for seasoned service know-how. A negative online critique can hurt reservations for an extended period. Biltmore stations specialized teams to track digital feedback and address issues. This side of operations would baffle George Vanderbilt, who paid no mind to outsiders' views of his residents. Eco-friendly practices now serve as both a promotional asset and essential operations. Biltmore has committed funds to power-saving tech, water-saving initiatives, and trash-minimizing strategies. Solar arrays aid traditional electricity. Systems to reclaim heat from exhaust boost efficiency. Such initiatives not only lower day-to-day expenses, but also boost the estate's attractiveness to eco-aware tourists. These eco-friendly efforts also draw favorable media coverage. Who might balk at the opulence of a 250-room mansion? It's comforting to know that today's management actively limits its ecological footprint. Seemingly, the clash between the estate's lavish Gilded Age roots and its modern dedication to green practices doesn't bother most patrons. Biltmore's achievements have turned it into a blueprint emulated by historic sites around the globe. Officials from French chateaus, English manor houses, and Asian cultural landmarks come to study its operational approach. From time to time, the estate organizes gatherings for heritage experts, exchanging knowledge on broadening income sources and streamlining daily functions. This reach amplifies Biltmore's role far beyond its own endurance. Aided in safeguarding architectural treasures that could have vanished. In this way, Biltmore's shift toward commerce aids heritage conservation at large, extending well past the Vanderbilt legacy. Yet every site pursuing this route grapples with a core dilemma. How much does financial prosperity erode the genuineness it's meant to uphold. When does a storied home cease to function as a safeguarded relic and morph into just an amusement attraction? Biltmore has balanced this conflict for generations. The debate persists without resolution. The property tax dynamics highlight the intricate ties between Biltmore and Buncombe County authorities in North Carolina. For years, the estate has faced yearly valuations that spark disputes. Officials claim it ought to be rated according to its worth as a bustling visitor enterprise, potentially yielding millions in yearly income. Biltmore maintains that evaluation should center on its farmland and wooded areas, viewing the house as a cultural landmark rather than a business hub. This classification carries huge weight. In North Carolina, farmland enjoys tax incentives to promote agriculture. Timberland gets similar breaks through lower valuations. Were Biltmore's 8,000 acres valued as business real estate at peak rates, the yearly levy might surpass $10 million. Instead, by classifying most as ag and forest, it pays around $3 million each year. The estate has resisted various revaluation pushes. The courtroom debates delve into specifics, like defining true farming activity against leisure commerce. Biltmore highlights its active agriculture, timber initiatives, and habitat protection work. The county counters with the inn's vineyard and enormous visitor earnings. Each perspective holds merit. Settlements often land on middle ground ratings that leave both parties somewhat dissatisfied. Area locals observe these clashes with ambivalent views. Steeper taxes on Biltmore could fund better public amenities, education, and roads. However, if levies grew too burdensome, the estate could scale back activities or divest land chunks. Such upheaval would cripple the local economy. Biltmore sustains thousands of positions outside its direct staff. Lodgings, eateries, and shops across Asheville thrive on crowds pulled by the property. Moreover, the estate's philanthropy muddies the waters more. It contributes to nearby education, backs cultural groups, and backs neighborhood initiatives. Legally, these gifts don't lessen tax duties, but they foster community rapport. During advocacy for lenient ratings, Biltmore can cite years of voluntary support, exceeding legal mandates. Staffing hurdles expose yet another layer of running a legacy site like a contemporary enterprise. Biltmore requires workers for classic duties such as guiding tours and tending grounds. Yet it also demands pros in hospitality management, sommeliers, occasion planners, and online promotion. Securing talent that spans these domains proves tough in the local job pool. Peak season swings add to hiring woes. Headcount might hit 1,800 in February but climb to 2,600 by December. Attracting steady personnel, open to these ups and downs, calls for strong pay and perks. Biltmore exceeds base wages for nearly all roles and provides medical coverage, pension options, and learning aid. These outlays significantly inflate running budgets. Preparing teams to embody the estate's image demands considerable effort and funds. Tour guides at the estate are required to master not only key historical details about the house, but also the art of storytelling to captivate visitors from varied backgrounds. Servers in the restaurants must grasp the nuances of wine selections and elegant dining etiquette. Hotel employees are expected to uphold top-tier luxury service levels. Each worker essentially serves as a representative of the Biltmore legacy, which demands an onboarding process that goes well beyond standard hospitality preparation. The property has further committed resources to staff accommodations. Certain employees reside in restored on-site structures, benefiting from discounted rents in return for their convenient location to the workplace. While this setup aids in attracting talent, it also obliges the estate to act as a property manager, handling upkeep and resident interactions. Such responsibilities illustrate yet another layer of duties that arose from commercial activities, ones George Vanderbilt never encountered. In the realm of cybersecurity and data handling, the estate confronts contemporary issues utterly absent from its founding days. Biltmore handles millions of credit card payments each year. It safeguards databases containing visitors' personal details. It runs booking platforms for lodging and excursions. These operations expose it to potential hacks and information leaks. The estate hires IT experts to oversee servers, connectivity, and protective measures. These professionals watch for unauthorized access and adhere to credit card security regulations. A breach could expose client data, tarnish the estate's image, and invite legal fines. None of these threats were present when Edith Vanderbilt first welcomed sightseers in 1930. Social media has revolutionized Biltmore's promotional strategies. The estate keeps a vibrant profile across various sites, sharing photos, promoting happenings, and interacting with fans. A breathtaking shot of the house during twilight might rack up thousands of reposts, attracting future guests with minimal expense, other than employee effort. However, the platforms also magnify dissatisfaction. A critical post can go viral quickly, demanding swift replies. Biltmore keeps a close eye on its digital image around the clock. Team members reply to feedback, resolve issues, and strive to turn detractors into enthusiasts. This non-stop image management would have seemed impossible in past times. Today, it is vital for sustaining crowds and justifying high fees. The COVID-19 crisis put Biltmore's operational framework to a grueling test. For the first time since 1930, the entire estate shut down in March 2020. No tours, no overnight stays, no wine events. Income halted even as costs persisted. The house still needed temperature regulation and guards. The grounds demanded care. Thousands of workers confronted job loss. Biltmore sought government aid for pandemic-hit enterprises. It resorted to temporary leaves and staff reductions as needed. Yet the Cecil family reached a pivotal choice. They pledged to retain the essential conservation team, no matter the economic strain. The house's integrity would endure, even amid potential failure. The estate resumed operations in June 2020 at limited scale, with rigorous health measures in place. Entry screenings for fevers required face coverings, directional paths inside the house, and smaller group tours. These steps comforted some patrons, but discouraged others. Yearly footfall dipped under 900,000, marking the weakest turnout in years. Earnings plunged by about 40%. Yet Biltmore endured. The varied revenue streams that skeptics once doubted showed their strength. As in-person visits waned, increased local hotel reservations for staycations offered a buffer. E-commerce wine purchases made up for the drop in on-site samplings. Accumulated savings from boom periods bridged the gap. By 2021, activities had mostly returned to form. Visitor counts climbed back near pre-crisis figures. The ordeal revealed both the estate's toughness and its fragilities. The enterprise could absorb major disruptions, but a full shutdown posed a fundamental danger. The crisis underscored that diversification alone cannot erase all uncertainties. Biltmore has likewise adapted to evolving guest preferences. Today's travelers anticipate wireless internet across the grounds. They seek smartphone applications for independent audio guides. They post updates online instantly during their stay. To fulfill these, Biltmore has poured millions into tech upgrades without compromising the house's antique essence. Adding Wi-Fi to a building with 2-foot-thick stone walls posed significant technical hurdles. Concealing wiring in preserved areas called for tailored fixes. The setup functions adequately in most spots, though it demands continual funding to sustain. The groundbreaking electrical setup George Vanderbilt installed in 1895 was cutting edge then. Now the digital backbone is just as indispensable, though vastly more intricate. Enhancements for accessibility have demanded a delicate equilibrium between safeguarding history and meeting regulatory demands. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires equitable access to public spaces, yet incorporating elements like elevators or ramps into a site designated as a National Historic Landmark entails discussions with heritage oversight bodies.
Biltmore has implemented certain accessibility enhancements, while contending that additional ones could unduly undermine the site's historical authenticity. These dialogues persist. The escalating climate crisis introduces enduring obstacles that the property is starting to tackle. Intensified extreme weather endangers both the house and its surrounding landscapes. Storms that seldom penetrated the mountains in the past now bring destructive gusts. The potential for floods has grown. To counter this, the estate has upgraded its stormwater management and fortified at-risk buildings. Still, adapting to climate shifts demands continuous funding. The gardens confront issues from evolving temperature and rainfall trends. Species that flourished in the estate's traditional weather regime now falter amid altered seasonal patterns. The horticulturists are testing new plant varieties, better suited to hotter, more humid environments. Yet this approach clashes with the aim of upholding Biltmore's foundational design. Once more, endurance might necessitate evolution. The matter of legacy hangs over all aspects. Bill Cecil Jr. oversees the estate at present, though upcoming generations will shoulder the duty. The family has set up trusts and business frameworks to avert compulsory divestment from inheritance taxes. Maintaining familial dedication over successive eras proves challenging, however. Eventually, a Cecil descendant could conclude that overseeing a vast tourist operation doesn't align with their personal aspirations. Biltmore maintains strategies for diverse outcomes. Should family stewardship prove untenable, a conservation agreement could safeguard the land against urbanization while permitting alternative oversight. If that option collapses, transferring ownership to a heritage group stays viable. Nevertheless, the family favors retaining authority, convinced that private control fosters superior care compared to bureaucratic alternatives. This perspective might seem biased, yet it draws from precedent. The estate allocates greater resources toward upkeep and upgrades than typical non-profit entities can muster. When steered effectively, commercial incentives finance conservation efforts that rely solely on contributions and entry fees would falter. Biltmore's achievements indicate that market dynamics and heritage protection can harmonize, particularly in select contexts. Step into Biltmore's grand entryway nowadays, and the inherent tensions stand out starkly. Overhead looms a majestic limestone stairway hewn from massive single slabs, one of America's most iconic photographic backdrops. Encircling you are crowds of sightseers gripping their phones, often in casual attire like shorts and athletic shoes, lining up for tours that set off every quarter hour. You're within George Vanderbilt's once private residence and amid a multi-billion-dollar leisure enterprise. These realities coexist. The modern guest journey embodies years of meticulous adjustments. Visitors buy reserved entry passes via the web, choosing exact slots to avoid congestion. On-site, they proceed through an arrival hub resembling a high-end retail atrium, more than a conventional exhibit entry. The lower level houses lavatories, a dining spot, and an expansive souvenir store. Moving walkways transport guests upward to the admission area. This setup handles thousands per day without sacrificing a sense of leisurely sophistication. The house exploration spans about 90 minutes for those who pore over each sign and scrutinize every chamber. Others breeze through more swiftly, allocating maybe 60 minutes indoors. They traverse areas where George and Edith once resided, now cordoned by silken barriers, security detectors, and unobtrusive environmental controls. The interiors replicate their state from the Vanderbilt era, serving today as display cases rather than habitable quarters. Docents deliver precisely worded details on the household, the design, and the artifacts. These narratives, grounded in exhaustive research and periodically refreshed with fresh scholarly insights, adhere to timed formats. Everyday familial vibrancy has yielded to curated delivery. Roughly 40% of today's attendees are returning patrons, drawn back for holiday adornments, blooming spring landscapes, or just to relive the grandeur. Certain devotees have come back, scores of times spanning years. For them,
Biltmore serves more as a comforting haven than a mere landmark, a serene escape from routine. The property's longevity manifests in various metrics. It has endured 129 years post-construction, surpassing George Vanderbilt's own lifespan. It has eclipsed over 90% of fellow Gilded Age estates, the majority razed shortly after erection. Unlike most comparable estates, which have been auctioned off, gifted to public trusts, or confiscated due to tax debts, Biltmore continues under family control. From an economic standpoint, its achievements paint a picture of triumph that would have appeared unattainable back in 1930, when Edith tentatively welcomed visitors with a modest $2 entry fee. Today's yearly income of $300 million far surpasses those early charges. Should the property ever be listed for sale, experts estimate its worth could surpass $1 billion. The millions spent each year on insurance underscore the priceless value of the asset under safeguard. Yet monetary prosperity alone doesn't resolve the core dilemma. Does this embody true preservation? George Vanderbilt envisioned a secluded retreat, showcasing how U.S. fortunes could yield enduring elegance. Today, Biltmore illustrates that such elegance demands business-oriented utilization to endure. Which principle might he value more highly? Advocates for strict preservation claim Biltmore has sacrificed integrity excessively. They highlight the on-site hotels, garden-hosted weddings, and souvenir shops as evidence of overreach. In their view, the house has devolved into a backdrop for a visitor-driven enterprise instead of a safeguarded relic. Others propose that donating it to a charitable entity years ago could have prioritized an uncompromised educational focus, even at the cost of reduced funds. However, the opposing perspective carries weight. Many nonprofit heritage sites grapple with perpetual financial shortfalls, relying on ticket sales that scarcely offset daily expenses, plus erratic philanthropic contributions tied to the economy. They often postpone repairs, shutter parts of the grounds, and cut personnel amid fiscal squeezes. Biltmore sidesteps these pitfalls through earnings robust enough to support top-tier upkeep. The house's pristine state bolsters this stance. Biltmore's restoration efforts outpace what typical museums can finance. Fabrics cycle through display rotations to curb damage from light. Environmental systems ensure steady climate conditions throughout the seasons. Skilled restorers handle artwork, furnishings, and ornaments with consistent attention. Roofing inspections avert minor issues from escalating into disasters. This rigorous regimen runs about $10 million per year, beyond routine costs. Scant few charitable groups possess the resources for such commitments. Biltmore's business income enables it all. Arguably, the house stands in finer shape today than ever before, shielded by technologies and knowledge unavailable during George's era. Beyond the house itself, the estate safeguards its 8,000 acres, still family-held, as an informal buffer zone, halting urban expansion and preserving scenic panoramas. The woodland initiative George founded persists, exemplifying responsible logging practices. These environmental wins stem straight from leveraging tourism dollars over timber harvesting or property sales. Biltmore's impact on U.S. heritage efforts reaches further than its own longevity. Its strategy has encouraged fellow landmarks to broaden revenue streams. Mount Vernon now includes exhibits and learning centers. Hearst Castle has bolstered guest amenities. Even overseas chateaus have examined Biltmore's methods for financial variety. This framework has emerged as the go-to for sites striving for economic stability. Detractors warn that it also mainstreams over-commercialization. Every new lodge on historic land eases acceptance of the subsequent one. Event spaces for nuptials evolve from odd additions to standard features. The boundary between safeguarding history and staging spectacles fades, complicating clear separation. Biltmore's ties to scholarly experts expose yet another conflict. It hires trained archivists to delve into family lore and curate records,
They disseminate research and collaborate with academics. That said, the estate regulates entry to original documents and steers the stories told to guests. Certain scholars have voiced frustration over limits on archive use or nudges to align discoveries with promotional goals. This isn't exclusive to Biltmore. Any entity holding historical assets imposes some oversight. But when that entity operates as a commercial venture, doubts surface about profit motives skewing factual accounts. Does Biltmore deliver the fullest historical truth or a polished, sellable rendition? The guided experiences highlight this divide. Narrators emphasize George's aspirations and Edith's resolve, yet seldom delve into familial disputes, entrepreneurial setbacks, or the shadowy underbelly of Gilded Age disparities. The story highlights the estate's elegance, ingenuity, and triumphs in upkeep. Topics that feel more uneasy tend to get overlooked. This approach makes good business sense, though it leaves out key historical details. The Vanderbilts hold a spot in this tale that's both elite and tangled. They came into fortunes from railroad dominance and the cutthroat ways of tycoons. George poured those funds into crafting a showcase of his elegant style, hiring workers and artisans at pay rates that look unfair through today's eyes. Today's Cecil family reaps the rewards of that heritage while running an enterprise fueled by the public's intrigue with the exact disparities that birthed Biltmore. Still, the Cecils have shown impressive care as guardians. They might have offloaded the property years back and enjoyed a secure life off the profits. Rather, they picked the tougher route of safeguarding it via bold business moves. They put money on the line for projects that might have flopped. They faced open judgment and backlash. They pledged to protect a stunning legacy, not out of obligation, but because they saw its worth. George Vanderbilt passed away in 1914 at 51 years old. He'd resided at Biltmore for under 2 decades, so he never witnessed his daughter Mary grow up, never encountered his grandsons, never realized his masterpiece would thrive into the 21st century. A world he'd shaped for himself and maybe for those to come. Yet he couldn't foresee the demands of that future. If he returned now and strolled the grounds, what would feel familiar? The sturdy limestone barriers, the intricately etched oak overheads, the woven fabrics and artworks he personally chose, the landscapes Olmsted envisioned, now fully grown and tenderly tended. George would cherish the sweeping mountain vistas that first lured him to this spot, but he'd also run into throngs of visitors in places he envisioned as serene retreats. He'd spot outsiders, resting in chambers he viewed as intimate. He'd notice his wife's lounge cordoned off as if in a gallery. He'd realize his woodland initiative had turned into a learning exhibit. He'd hear how folks shell out $30,000 for wedding ceremonies amid his gardens. Would this shock him or comfort him? No one can say for sure. George Vanderbilt isn't around to endorse or reject the empire his heirs have forged from his ambition. The estate persists without his nod or consent, propped up by choices he didn't influence and reshaped for aims he never envisioned. Biltmore sits where safeguarding history meets profit-making, showing they can align even as it sparks debate on if they ought to. It thrives as a landmark, a company, and a lineage's inheritance all at once. It hires thousands, draws in millions of guests, and pulls in revenue by the hundreds of millions. It safeguards priceless structures and treasures while serving as a leisure hotspot. A full 129 years since its finish, Biltmore holds the title of America's grandest private residence, but it's evolved beyond just a dwelling. It serves as evidence that keeping history alive can work via market-driven efforts. It's an example of repurposing old spaces without tearing them down. It's a billion-dollar operation, rooted in one individual's captivating drive to build something timeless. The house has endured, though by morphing into an entity George Vanderbilt couldn't have pictured and perhaps wouldn't have chosen. If that shift counts as victory or concession, hinges on your priorities.
upholding visual splendor or sticking to the founder's vision, keeping the building intact or nurturing its essence. Maybe the sole sure thing is this. Absent the money-making that's slammed by detractors, Biltmore would have been razed long ago. The mansion lasts thanks to William Cecil and his lineage erecting a powerhouse around it. George brought forth splendor. William engineered the system that sustains that splendor. Picture yourself in the grand foyer, amid the crowds, and attempt to envision it, hushed and vacant, owned by a single household once more. Piled up, but gaze at that limestone piled up, but gaze at that limestone stairway hewn from solid slabs. Admire the skill that's withstood 129 years. Marvel at the allure. George Vanderbilt pushed to craft it all, no matter the price or fallout. That allure lives on. The mansion rises tall. The vision persists, altered, yet resilient. A tribute to one man's foresight and 3 generations' resolve to defend it however needed. Biltmore lasts not in the form George conceived, but because his kin refashioned it into a survivor against a future he never anticipated.